The U.S. intervened in Russia. It was called the Allied intervention in the Russian Civil War. In 1918, the U.S. forces arrived in northern Russia. Let's start with the beginning. When and where did this take place? The Russian intervention happened between 1918 and 1922. It took place in the northern part of Russia. Why did the United States intervene? The reason behind U.S. intervention in World War I. Russia in 1918 had recently undergone a revolution, and the old Tsar, who was the Emperor of Russia, had fallen. This revolution led to the rise of the Bolshevik government. On March 3, 1918, the Bolshevik government of Soviet Russia signed a separate peace treaty with the Central Powers in Brest-Litovsk, thus leaving the war and closing the Eastern Front. Now you may be wondering, what does the U.S. have to do with this? While the Tsar used to be a friend to the Allies, the Bolsheviks denied war material and ports to the Americans. The rise of communism also scared the Allies because they felt it would give Germany an advantage in Russia. The Allied forces shipped supplies to Russia since the beginning of the war. If Russia decided to suddenly change sides, the Germans would have access to a large amount of Allied weapons. All of these factors caused Allied forces to worry. If Russia decided to change sides in the war, victory might be lost. Thus, an intervention became necessary. What was the goal in intervention? The goal of this intervention was to help the Czechoslovak Legion to secure supplies of weapons in Russian ports and to re-establish the Eastern Front, the border between Germany and Russia. As learned before, when the Bolsheviks took control of Russia, they denied the war for materials and ports, leading to the Germans. There was a fear of communism and closing of the Eastern Fronts, which led to an intervention. During the denial of war material, Allied commanders feared German forces would take the materials located in Russia and Russia would be seized by Germany. The fear of communism, the trumpet of the Bolsheviks, made Allied commanders in Russia fear that the Bolsheviks would spread communism through Western Europe and beyond. Lastly, closing the Eastern Fronts. This happened when Russia signed a peace treaty with Central Powers called the Brest-Litovsk Treaty that ended Russia's participation in World War I. Then the Eastern Fronts collapsed, which meant Germans started invading Russia. So in 1918, thousands of Russian troops, with about 13,000 American troops, were sent to restart the Eastern Front. Defeating the Bolsheviks meant that the Germans would be put back into position and revive the effort that Russia put into the war. Who were the major people/organizations involved, and what did they believe? The French, the British, were a major part of this intervention. The major people and organizations involved were the Czechoslovak and Bolsheviks Party, Vladimir Lenin, who was the leader of the Bolshevik Party, and Alexander Dubček, who was the leader of the Czechoslovak Party. The French, the British, and the Germans were involved in the United States intervention in Russia. During the intervention, the Germans were trying to threaten Russia and tried to capture the Russian capital, Moscow, then imposed the regime in 1918. Vladimir Lenin tried to cut a deal with Germans, but it didn't happen until late February. The Brest-Litovsk Treaty made British material in Russia a threat of being taken by the communist government or Germans. British, France, Japan, and USA all agreed to help out. The Americans, 280 of them, that were transporting exports, were sent to Russia for military commissions. The Japanese traveled to Vladivostok after the Kerensky's fall in December. French soldiers appeared with Ukraine in a struggle among communism. British concentrated in north in Murmansk, fighting but gave up and ventured in 1919. Was the intervention known to the public at that time? The intervention was and wasn't known to the public at that time. They knew there was an intervention, but they did not know why and what it was for. But a man called Fyodor Khrushchev remembers. He's now in his 80s. He said, "I must admit," he wrote in his memoirs, "I do not know what the United States was trying to accomplish by military intervention." Was the intervention ultimately successful? Did the United States achieve their goal? The intervention wasn't ultimately successful because the Russian forces greatly outnumbered the American forces. The U.S. did not achieve their goals because the scale of the war between the Russian Reds and Whites had very little impact on the Civil War, such that the Allies soon realized they would have little, if any, direct impact unless they were prepared to intervene on a far greater scale. By the end of April 1919, the French had withdrawn their soldiers and the Allies were involved in almost no military engagements. British and American troops saw some action in November 1918 on the northern front near the port of Murmansk, but this campaign was not significant in the outcome of civil war. The last British and American soldiers were withdrawn in 1920. What happened to the people who were living there at that time? Did they leave? If they left, where did they go?
Капиталисты Англии, Америки, Франции ведут войну против России. Они мстят Советской Рабочей и Крестьянской Республике за то, что она свергла власть помещиков и капиталистов и дала тем пример для всех народов земли. Капиталисты Англии, Франции и Америки помогают деньгами и военными припасами русским помещикам, которые ведут против советской власти войска из Сибири, с Дона, Северного Кавказа, желая восстановить власть царя, власть помещиков, власть капиталистов. Нет, этому не бывать. Красная армия сплотилась, поднялась, прогнала помещичьи войска и белогвардейских офицеров от Волги, отвоевала Ригу, отвоевала почти всю Украину, подходит к Одессе и к Ростову.